AITA for freaking out after my boyfriend ditched me at the theater and I found him making out with another girl. I, 24F, and my boyfriend Josh, 26M, have been together for about a year and a half. Everything's been great, or so I thought. Yesterday, we decided to have a low-key date night and went to see a movie at a theater we frequent. Things went downhill, and now I'm questioning everything. So, here's what happened. We decided to go see this new action movie that just came out. We were both excited because it had gotten great reviews, and we both love action flicks. On the way to the theater, I realized I had left my phone at home. I mentioned it to Josh, thinking it wasn't a big deal. He asked if I was sure I'd be okay without it, and I said, yeah, no big deal. After all, it was just a couple of hours, and I'd be with him the whole time. We got to the theater, grabbed some popcorn and drinks, and settled in for the movie. Everything was normal. The movie was great, and we both enjoyed it. Afterward, I told Josh I needed to use the restroom and that I'd meet him by the entrance. This was our usual routine, we've done it 100 times before. He nodded, still scrolling through his phone, and I went to the bathroom. When I came out, I walked to the entrance expecting to see him there, but he wasn't. I figured maybe he'd gone to the restroom himself, so I waited by the door for a few minutes. But after a while, I started to get a little anxious. I didn't have my phone to text him or check where he was, and he had the car keys, so I couldn't just leave. I decided to check outside by the car, thinking maybe he'd gone there to wait for me, but he wasn't there either. Now I was really starting to worry. I went back inside and checked near the men's restroom. Still no sign of him. I walked around the theater, trying to keep an eye out for him, thinking maybe he'd gotten distracted or something. After about 10 minutes of this, I was getting really upset. I felt lost, frustrated, and kind of abandoned. Some strangers even noticed I was upset and offered to get me an Uber, but I declined. I didn't want to leave without at least finding out where he was. I was about to give up and just wait by the car when I noticed a small lounge area near the concession stand. I thought maybe he was sitting there waiting for me, so I walked over to check. That's when I saw him, kissing another girl. I'm not talking about a peck on the cheek or something innocent. No, they were full on making out, like they couldn't care less about who saw them. My heart stopped. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. This couldn't be real, right? I mean, we had just spent the evening together, enjoying a movie, laughing, and having a good time. But there he was, with his hands all over this girl, who was equally into it. I felt a surge of anger and heartbreak all at once. I didn't even think. I just marched over there and yelled his name. The sound of my voice must have shocked them because they both looked up at me, wide-eyed. The girl jumped up so fast, it was like she'd been burned. She mumbled something like, I didn't know he had a girlfriend, and practically ran out of the theater. Josh just sat there, frozen, as if he couldn't believe I was standing in front of him. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. I was shaking, trying to hold back the tears and the urge to scream at him right there in public. Finally, I managed to ask, what the hell, Josh? What is this? And do you know what he said? It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I saw it with my own eyes. He started stumbling over his words, trying to explain that he'd run into this girl he knew from college, and they were just catching up. Then he had the nerve to say they just got caught up in the moment. Caught up in the moment? With another girl? While I was wandering around the theater looking for him? I was furious. I couldn't even think straight. I demanded the car keys, telling him I was done, and we were leaving. But he didn't hand them over right away. No, instead he tried to downplay the whole thing, saying I was overreacting and that it wasn't a big deal. He kept insisting that we should talk about this like adults and not make a scene. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he act like I was the one causing the problem? I just walked away, out of the theater, and sat down on a bench outside. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have my phone, and I had no way of contacting anyone. I just sat there, staring at the ground, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After what felt like an eternity, Josh came outside and handed me the keys, still insisting that I was making too much out of this. I couldn't even look at him. I got in the car and drove home in complete silence. He didn't say a word the entire ride. When we got to my place, I told him to leave. He just shrugged, like it didn't even matter, and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the whole thing in my head, wondering how I had missed the signs, if there even were any. I felt like my world had just crumbled around me, and I didn't know what to do next. Update 1. After a sleepless night, I woke up determined to get some answers. I knew I couldn't just leave things the way they were. I needed closure, and I needed to know if this was a one-time thing or if there was more going on behind my back. I texted Josh and told him I wanted to talk. He agreed to come over later that day to pick up his stuff. When he arrived, he seemed oddly calm, like he didn't understand why I was so upset. We sat down, and I told him I needed to know the truth. Had he been seeing this girl, or anyone else, behind my back? He sighed, like this was all a huge inconvenience for him, and then he started talking. He told me that the girl I saw him with was an old friend from college. They had lost touch for a while, but she had recently moved back to town, and they had reconnected. He swore that nothing had happened between them until that night at the theater. He said he didn't plan on kissing her, that it just happened because they were caught up in nostalgia and the excitement of seeing each other again. He kept saying it was a mistake, that he didn't mean to hurt me, and that it didn't mean anything. But the more he talked, the angrier I got. How could he be so casual about something that was tearing me apart? When I asked him why he didn't tell me about her in the first place, he said he didn't think it was a big deal and didn't want to ruin the vibe of our date night. He also said that he didn't think I'd understand because I get jealous easily. That last comment hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never been the jealous type, but now I was questioning everything. Was he trying to make me feel like this was somehow my fault? I couldn't believe how dismissive he was being. Finally, I told him that I didn't think I could trust him anymore. I said that his actions showed a complete lack of respect for me and our relationship, and that I couldn't be with someone who would treat me like this. He didn't even try to fight for us. He just nodded, said he understood, and left. I felt numb after he left. I thought I'd feel relieved to have some closure, but instead, I just felt empty. I kept thinking about all the good times we had, all the plans we had made, and how quickly it had all fallen apart. I couldn't believe that the person I had loved and trusted could be so careless with my heart. Edit. A few days after the breakup, I was still struggling to process everything. I had spent most of my time either crying or trying to distract myself with work, but nothing seemed to help. I felt like I was drowning in my own thoughts. That's when I got a message from a girl I didn't recognize on Instagram. She introduced herself as Becca and said she was the girl I had caught Josh kissing at the theater. My heart dropped. I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know what she had to say. Becca apologized for what happened and said she had no idea Josh was in a relationship when they reconnected. She told me that they had gone to college together, but they hadn't been close back then. They only started hanging out again after running into each other a few weeks ago. According to her, Josh never mentioned having a girlfriend, and she only found out about me when she saw how shocked he was when I confronted them. She went on to tell me that Josh had been very flirty with her from the start and that she assumed he was single based on how he was acting. They had gone out for drinks a couple of times, and she admitted that there was a mutual attraction, but nothing physical had happened until that night at the theater. Becca said she felt terrible for being involved in this mess and wanted to apologize directly to me. She also told me that she had cut off all contact with Josh after finding out about me, and she hoped that I could find it in my heart to forgive her. I didn't know how to respond. On the one hand, I appreciated her honesty and the fact that she reached out to apologize. But on the other hand, it hurt to hear that Josh had been actively pursuing her while still in a relationship with me. It made everything feel so much worse. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to respond to Becca. I told her that I didn't blame her for what happened, and I appreciated her coming forward. I also told her that I was done with Josh and that I hoped we could both move on from this mess. She thanked me for understanding, and that was the last time we spoke. It was a bittersweet moment, but it helped me start to let go of the anger and pain I had been holding on to.